That game wasn't won by the man who made that touchdown. It was won by a team, and every man on the team had a share in winning it. We're playing another kind of a game now, only this one isn't for fun. It's for keeps. And this game won't be won by any single player either. It'll be won by a team called the United Nations. The ball will be carried by the men in the backfield. That tough little guy from China, Big Joe Russia, John Britain, and a guy called Yank, the 4 greatest backs in the world. So let's take a look at the men who carry the ball with us. Who are they? How do they live? What makes them tick? Let's start with the one that's toughest to understand, the one we know just enough about to confuse us, John Britain.
Here's where he lives. A little island no larger than the state of Idaho. 500,000 people live in Idaho, in Britain. The Nazis and the Japs scream about Lebensraum, living space. But there are more people on a square mile of Britain than a square mile of Germany or Italy or Japan. More congestion than practically any place on earth except the New York subway or a sardine can. And that's a clue that explains a lot about John Britain. We build front porches on our houses because we didn't want to miss the chance to see our neighbors. But John Britain hides himself in a little box and plants a hedge around that to make sure he doesn't. Living that close to neighbors, privacy is part of the pursuit of happiness. And in the sardine can called Britain, they learn to get on with their neighbors. They have to. He's too damn close. That's why they have so little crime in Britain. Believe it or not, even in wartime, the British cop does not carry a gun, nor does the professional crook. And in 1926, when the world heard of this stoppage of work in Britain, that industry, transportation, the whole life of the country had been paralyzed by a general strike, it was still more surprised next day to learn that the strikers were playing football with the cops. You can only understand that if you live in a sardine can.
The second clue to this guy on our team. No part of Britain is more than 100 miles from the sea. Every day for hundreds of years, years of peace and years of war, John Britain has seen ships sail from his island to the 7 seas. That means that whenever John Britain wants to bust out of his sardine can, it's the sea that gets him. He's been busting out for hundreds of years, and that led to Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Canada, and for that matter, the United States of America.
How did John Britain get on our team? Remember 1938? The Yankees won the pennant. Wrong way, Corrigan. The last trains ran on the 6th Avenue L. Well, John Britain got excited about the same sort of things. The bet he had on the Derby, or, as he would say, the Derby. His job. His kids. Getting his exercise on his day off. Preston North End taking the football cup. Only 300 miles away, people were cheering another kind of event. And in London and every other British city and town, they read about what was going on in Europe, and they got sore about it. But they were also pretty well determined to keep it none of their business. Then, this looked bad. The Czechs had a mutual assistance pact with France, and France had one with Britain. This might mean war, even though everyone was anxious to avoid it. They'd been through one war, perhaps been wounded. Hundreds of thousands of their brothers and friends had been killed. There was nothing beautiful to them about war, and they had no desire for another.
In a last desperate effort to preserve peace, the Prime Minister today flew to Munich.
All was well. Britain, France, Italy, and Germany were signing a pact at Munich, a pact in which the Germans agreed they had no further territorial claims to make. It was to be peace in our time. But it turned out to be a strange sort of peace. Hitler's first move was to break the pact he had signed. Wishful thinking was ended. Now they knew something had to be done about Germany.
They approved the Conscription Act, the first peacetime conscription in British history, just as the Selective Service Act was the first in American history. The British had put their cards on the table. They had, in effect, said to Hitler,
"That's enough. If you go into Poland, we'll fight."
Hitler smiled. Like other would-be conquerors of Britain, Philip of Spain, Napoleon, Kaiser Wilhelm, he thought he understood the British. He didn't. The sleeping lion began to wake up. He was a pretty drowsy lion for the first 6 months of the war. He snapped and growled. But he dropped more leaflets than bombs. He hoped that common sense would return to the German people and that they would throw out Hitler and the German warlords. Instead,
at dawn this morning, the German armies, without warning, invaded the neutral countries of Luxembourg, Holland, and Belgium.
The King of the Belgians today surrendered his armies of more than 500,000 men.
Marshal Pétain, as French chief of state, has asked for an armistice. The issue in France is ended.
Britain was alone. Czechoslovakia occupied, Poland defeated, Denmark gone, Norway gone, Holland, Belgium, France gone. Only Britain now. Britain was alone. Hitler considered the war over. Everybody considered the war over except the British. At the 11th hour, the lion was finally aroused.
We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on beaches, landing grounds, in fields, in streets, and on the hills. We shall never surrender.
For a year, they took everything that the Nazis could throw at them. For one solid year, from June 1940 to June of 1941, they were the only major power fighting the greatest war machine in the world. They took body blow after body blow, solid punches before they even had their guard up. All they did was take it on the chin and hang on to the ropes. They never went down.